Okay. And when we get started there, we'll start recording on here as well. Okay. Here we are. Okay, so we're going to have a look at nouns. Okay, we introduced the idea of the verbs, modal verbs, auxiliary verbs. We even did a bit of question grammar last week. But this week, what we're going to look at is nouns. It's a short week. Obviously, everybody had Monday off this week because of the public holiday. So we've got 4 days. In these 4 days, we'll introduce nouns. We'll talk a little bit about countable and uncountable today. And then we'll move on to something which I think is more useful for OET in terms of writing and also probably reading as well. So we'll look at things like noun phrases and gerunds this week. So, and nominalization, something that can really help us become much more concise. But today we'll just introduce the nouns. So I think that everybody knows what a noun is, but I'm just going to ask somebody. Let's go for Muhiba. What's a noun? Any idea?
Yes, noun, I think it is name of, could be name of a person, name of thing, name of, so.
Yeah.
So mostly we are using as a subject or object and the grammar, but it can be anything.
Okay, so a name of things.
Yes.
Okay, I think the right word there is thing. You're absolutely right. They are things, aren't they? Nouns are things. Okay, so nouns are things. Give me an example of a noun, Muhiba. Any noun you like.
Everything. So
everything.
Mobile phone. Yes, mobile phone. Table, paper, books, TV, so internet, everything.
Yeah, okay, TV, the internet. Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, all of these things. Everything is a noun. That word is a noun. So what I'm interested in is how we treat nouns in sentences, how we recognize them, what we do with them. Because most people wouldn't think of everything as being a noun. Everyone thinks of these things being nouns, but you wouldn't think of everything, the word everything, as being a noun. But it is a noun, and that's all to do with how they're treated, you know, how they behave in sentences, what they do in sentences. And ultimately, the whole purpose of us reviewing what nouns are is so we can be a bit more accurate in our writing, and then maybe even a bit more complex, a bit more advanced. Because just like everything, nouns can be very, very simple, or they can be a bit more complicated. So they're really, really common in English, obviously. So let's start with the basics. Okay. Yes. Last week we talked about verbs. Okay. Subject verb is the basis of saying what happens. Okay. Saying what happens. Object verb obviously is also useful. So a subject, let's just break this down. A subject is the doer.
Doer of an action.
Of an action. Yeah. The doer of an action. Okay. Now, a subject doesn't have to be a person. Okay. It doesn't have to be a person, but it can be a person. Doesn't have to be. Okay. An object is the receiver
of an action.
Of an action. Okay. So if you've never thought about English in this way or thought about your own language in this way, it's an interesting concept. And it really helps with things like active and passive, which is what we will be teaching later on. Passive, huge part of English. Okay, huge part of OET. So the subject is the doer of an action. The object is the receiver of an action. So let's try and think of some verbs. So if I was to ask Mariam, are you there, Mariam? Hello, Mariam.
Yes.
Yes. Hello. Okay. Can you give me some verbs? Give me 3 verbs.
Work.
Work, yeah.
Study,
Study, yeah, okay.
focus,
And focus. Okay, now that's really interesting. 3 very interesting verbs, and they tell me a lot about what you're thinking about at the moment. Okay, all right, okay, so these are really interesting. Okay, because they're not all the same. They're not all the same. So there's a concept in English which is transitive and intransitive. Okay, now transitive verbs, they have objects. They call it take an object. And intransitive, they don't take an object. So work, that's not, I mean, there are some very rare times when we do use work as a transitive verb, but generally it's intransitive. Think about it. I work as a teacher. I work in a school. I have worked for 50 years. Okay. I don't work something. That's not what really happens. I mean, people do say it sometimes. I can't work this phone, but it's not very common. And you wouldn't use that in OET. Okay. It's generally intransitive. Study is generally transitive. Okay. So you guys, you're studying OET. OET is an object. So the verb to study, generally, not always, you don't always need to, you can just say, be quiet, I am studying. It doesn't have to be transitive, okay? I am studying now. Okay, that would be intransitive, then you don't have an object. Okay, in both of these sentences, the subject is I. That's a subject. Okay. OET here is an object. Focus is another one. You can focus a camera. So as transitive, I focused my camera. Okay, that is, in that case, it's a transitive verb because it's got an object. That's at the end of it. I focused my camera. But generally, we would say focus on, wouldn't we?
I am focusing on my study.
I am focusing on my studies. Yeah. So generally here, we would say I'm focusing on. That's a preposition that comes with it. But my studies is the object here. Would I ever say I focus, I am focusing? You wouldn't do it. It's not very common to use it without any type of an object. But objects are these words that we do things to. Okay, but just because camera is an object here, it doesn't mean that it can't be a subject in another sentence. Okay, so think about this. My camera weighs a lot. Okay, so in this case, my camera is the subject. It's now changed. Doesn't have to be a person, a subject. So a subject is the thing that does something. So it's followed by an active verb like this. It weighs. Okay, so here I focused. Here my camera weighs. So just because you learn a noun as being a subject or an object in one sentence, it doesn't mean that it's a subject or an object in another. Okay, so subjects are the doers of actions. Objects are the receivers of actions. Does anyone have any questions about that? Go on, Helen.
Sorry, Paul.
Helen. Sorry, Amal. Helen's put her hand up. Go on, Helen.
Hi, Paul. About the everything, I would like to ask, you say it is a noun. What about the other things like something, nothing?
Yeah, they're all nouns.
Okay, thank
you. Think about it. Okay, so I need to eat something. I don't know anything. Okay. These are nouns, aren't they? I need to eat is a verb. Something is an object. I don't know. Okay. Anything must be the object of that. They're just nouns. So what I'm interested in is what role do they play in a sentence? And the reason why I'm saying that is because it's not just about whether it's one word, it's about what they do in a sentence that's important. What if I said, everything annoys me these days? Okay. Again, here it's a subject. Okay. So it is a noun. Amal, what was your question?
Just I want to know a bit more about the intensive and inintransitive.
Intransitive, do you mean?
Yeah.
Intransitive. So intransitive means that we need to follow it with an object. So another example, eat. What do you eat?
Breakfast.
You eat an object, don't you? Yeah, breakfast. Okay, it could be breakfast. It could be a pizza.
Sandwich.
It could be a sandwich, exactly, yeah. Okay. What do we sleep? Do you sleep something?
No.
You don't, do you? So there's no object that comes with sleep. You can sleep in a bed. You can sleep well. That's an adverb. But you can't sleep something. That's not possible. You can't sleep it.
Yeah.
It's a word that you can't put a noun with afterwards. Okay. So transitive, it has something after the verb. Intransitive, it doesn't have something after the verb. And like all things like this in English, there are some which can do both. So I am eating. Okay, you don't have to say what comes after it. Okay. If you think about kick, you generally kick a ball, don't you?
Yeah.
But what about when the baby's in the womb? You can feel it kicking, can't you?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not kicking anything. It's just kicking. It's just doing a kicking motion with the leg. So in that case, kick can be transitive or intransitive. Depends on the context. And that's always the case, isn't it? It's always about context.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So countable and uncountable. Okay. This is useful for us. It is useful. All right. And it's definitely something that you should practice, but we did it not so long ago. So I'll just do a very quick review. So let's look at this word, IV tube. Okay, so if I was to ask, if I was to go and ask Renuka, are you there, Renuka?
Hello, sir.
Hi, Renuka. What do you think about IV tube? Is that countable or uncountable?
Countable.
It's countable, isn't it? So how many? If there was a patient in intensive care, Renuka, how many IV tubes would they have? 1, 2? 2? One maybe for antibiotics or something, and another one for fluids. I don't know. Yeah. So the patient has 2 IV tubes. Okay, the patient has 2 IV tubes. Thanks, Renuka. Okay, a bit of noise in the background. So here, the word tube, that's a countable noun. Okay, it's countable. So that means I can put an S at the end of it. That means I can pluralize it. Okay, you can pluralize the word tube very, very easily. Look at the word care. Okay, Mr. Smith requires a care. Does that make sense to you?
No.
No. Is it? That's not right, because it's not a care. Okay, it's care as an uncountable. That's what's necessary there. It's uncountable. Tube is countable. We can literally look at it and we can say there's one and there's another. With care, we can't do that. Okay, that's uncountable, which is important for us to know. It does definitely lead us to make basic errors. They're not generally ones that that will confuse, but when you get something like this incorrect in a list, it can be one of those things that contributes to a list being a bit confusing if you're putting 4 or 5 things together, because you might put 3 countable things and an uncountable thing, and the same articles used all the way through. It can be a bit confusing. So I'm not going to go into too much detail. If you go onto the website and type in countable, uncountable, you'll get loads of different videos about that. And then we've got both. Okay, we've got both as well. Have a look at this word, dressing. Dressing. Now that can be countable or it can be uncountable. So as an uncountable, I might say something like this. Dressing is required on a daily basis for Mr. Smith. Okay, dressing is required on a daily basis for Mr. Smith. Or I might say for Mr. Smith's ulcer or wound. Okay, but if I was to say to you, how many dressings has he had this week? Or how many dressing changes has he had this week? You can count them. Okay, he has had 3 dressings this week. Because a dressing can be a thing that you hold. Here is a dressing. Okay, it can be a count, you can count them, but it can also be just the process of wrapping a bandage around something. He has a dressing on at the moment. He requires clean dressings. So they can be countable or they can be uncountable. It's an important thing for you to be able to understand. So definitely go and practice that one. All right. Any questions about countable, uncountable at this point? No? Good. Compound nouns. Okay. Compound nouns are a bit strange. Okay. This is where I think this starts to become much more useful. Okay, yeah, we can make errors with countable and uncountable. We can make errors with transitive, intransitive. But I think that the way that it starts to become more useful is in the section that we're looking at now. So we're going to do more on noun phrases and gerunds this week and compound nouns. What we should remember is sometimes nouns have more than one word. Just like verbs. Okay, verbs can have more than one word. So imagine Paul is listening. Okay, Paul is listening. Now that is counted as a verb in English. Okay, is listening, but it's made up of 2 words. Paul has been listening. Now the verb is made up of 3 words. Well, it's similar to that in terms of nouns as well. So what could it be? Paul has been attending his son's 3-week checkup, or 6-week checkup, sorry. That needs a hyphen as well, look. Okay. So that is confusing, I think. There's different ways of looking at that sentence. And you can say to yourself, okay, I'm going to go word by word. Okay, each one. You could do that if you wanted to. Subject, auxiliary verb, the verb to be, auxiliary verb again, attending, present participle, his, possessive adjective. It just, why would I do that though? That's not how we understand that sentence. I think what you understand that sentence as is 3 things. Okay, that's how we break it down. I think that's how we understand. So if I break that down into three things, I think subject plus verb plus object. I don't know what anyone else thinks. For me, that's subject plus verb plus object. And in the middle of it, you've got this compound noun. So a 6-week checkup. Okay, a 6-week checkup. Notice that it's not 6 weeks. Okay, a 3-year-old girl, a 7-month holiday. All of these are called compound nouns. There are other types of compound nouns we'll have a look in a minute, but it's important. This is really, really common for you to use in OET writing. Okay, we don't say a 6 weeks checkup. We don't say a 3-year-old girl. It's important to remember in a compound noun, we do not pluralize the noun.
But they are plural.
I know they are. So why do you think, Hussein?
It's 6, it's plural, it's not
I
one.
know it's plural.
3 is not one.
So why do you think we don't say 6 weeks?
6 week is only one thing. 6
It's
weeks.
an adjective, I think.
It's not that so much.
Because of the compound, that's why.
There's nothing technical about it. It's just harder to say, isn't it?
But when we learn English in Afghanistan, they said when we have 6 or plural, we just make
I know.
S at
So
the end of this. Yeah.
he has been in hospital for 6 weeks. Now it's plural. But when it's part of a compound noun, this is the noun. Okay. This is the noun. This is the noun. Okay. When it's part there, we don't put the plural. And I don't think that there's any other explanation apart from it's more difficult to say. A 6 weeks old, sorry, a 3 years old girl, a 6 weeks checkup, it just takes longer. It's more difficult to say.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that happens in English that you need to practice and remember. Again, it's not going to be the difference between someone understanding and someone not understanding, but it'll be the difference between sounding professional and sounding unprofessional, I think. And again, it's not a massive issue. But if you do a mistake with transitive verbs and countables and uncountables, if you get your subjects and objects wrong and you get your compound nouns wrong, you're making the errors of a basic user of English. And if you're making the errors of a basic user of English, then your scores are going to be affected in OET writing, for sure. You won't sound like you're a professional. Unfortunately, when you're not good, pardon me, guys, when you're not good at another language, it does have the impact of making you sound a bit basic. I know that. I've had that experience myself, and it's frustrating. So it's good to practice it. And one of the things I say all the time is there's one thing that you know will definitely always be there in the OET exam, and that's the grammar. Okay, you don't know if part A is going to be about burns or arthritis or psoriasis. You don't know if part C, listening, is going to be a really difficult presentation about hand hygiene. You don't know what the content is going to be. Is it discharge in the OET writing? Is it a referral? You don't know. But what you can be absolutely certain about is that the grammar rules will not change in between now and then. So learn the grammar rules. It's never a waste of time. Okay, so let's revisit this idea that you've got more than one word sometimes for a noun. Earlier on, when we first looked, we said table, everything, iPhone, people. They're all one word. But this is a compound noun. It puts two things, two nouns together. So a few other examples. Sunglasses. Sun cream is separate. Armchair is together. Check up is two things with a hyphen. There are other things with hyphens that I can't really remember. I don't think the hyphens are going to matter in the exam here. I really don't think that's really very important for you. But there are times when we put nouns together. Other times where we don't put them together. Think about other things like backache, that goes together. And headache, they go together. Earache, I don't really often see them going together.
Well-being.
Well-being's another one, yeah, well-being. And ultimately, you know what happens, guys? Sometimes, like this one, for instance, earache, I think people might do that. It depends. Different people, I would say different natives. If you got 100 natives together, they would probably, some people would put earache together and some people wouldn't. Some people might even put headache separately. So sometimes it's something which you can't even rely on 100%. Sometimes it is. Armchair generally goes together. Sunglasses go together, but sun cream doesn't. Why? I don't know. It's just the way that the language has developed over time.
You have seen repeatedly, we practice this.
If you see them repeatedly, yeah, then you tend to just copy what you see, don't you?
Yes.
Okay. But this is something that people often get wrong. And it's something that does come up in OET writing, and it's important that you get that right. Okay, so those are compound nouns. Now, something which is a bit more complicated is something that combines things like gerunds and noun phrases, combine them together. And it is this idea of sometimes nouns have more than one word. And we'll put that again down here. Now, gerunds. Gerunds, they often come after certain phrases in English. Okay. Okay, such as prepositions they come after, but sometimes not to, as we know already. Okay, sometimes not to, but all of the prepositions, if you want to follow with a noun, it's fine. But if you want to follow with a verb, you have to turn it into a gerund. Okay, so gerunds are noun forms of actions. That's what they are. Gerunds are noun forms of actions. So quite often, the way I would teach rules in English is that you have more than one rule in a sentence sometimes. And it's like those two rules clash. And sometimes they compromise and they do something together. But sometimes one rule beats the other. So we know that subjects are followed by verbs. Okay. But when there's a preposition or a phrase like some linking phrases, like as a result of, in addition to, etc., we know that they are followed by nouns. Okay, so in addition to a broken neck, Paul had a broken wrist. Okay, well, that is a noun. If you want to put a verb after that, an action, it has to become an ing. Okay, so a gerund is a verb plus an ing, and that turns it from being a verb into being a noun. Okay, so if we have a look now with prepositions, okay, I am scared of flying. It's not I am scared of fly. It's I'm scared of flying. Okay, Mr. Smith is allergic to, you'd put morphine, wouldn't you? That one is followed by a noun each time. So you can see that in this situation, we've got prepositions. Flying is the same as morphine. It's a noun. Okay, as a joke, you might say, my son is allergic to waking up early. Okay, he stays in bed all day. It's a bit of a joke, but notice it's the same thing, waking up early, even though we've said morphine here. So sometimes we have to follow with a verb and it becomes a gerund. Okay. In addition to feeling wheezy. Okay, that's a bit nauseous. You feel a bit sick in your stomach. In addition to feeling queasy, Mr. Smith was confused. Okay, so after in addition to, we've got this gerund. Okay, that is the noun form of the verb to feel. Okay, now, the other thing that we do with gerunds is we sometimes start sentences with them. And they can be both objects and subjects. Okay, so let's have a think about what we could do here. So for instance, what could we do? We could say something like, yeah, taking medication is important. So notice we've put a gerund at the beginning there. Mr. Smith has been reminded about the importance of taking his medication. Okay, so taking can be down here. If I change it to something really simple, swimming. Swimming is healthy. How about this one? I like swimming. So here you've got the gerund at the beginning as subject. Swimming is healthy. And here I've got it as the object. So all nouns can be subjects or objects. All right. Alperen, did you put your hand up?
Yeah, hello, Paul. I
Hi.
want to ask you something.
Okay.
Can we use articles before the gerunds?
It's possible to use the in front of gerunds, yeah, in certain situations. But we've got loads of classes on articles on the website as well. Okay. Okay, so gerunds are noun forms of actions. There are times when we've got phrases that need to be followed by gerunds. And we use these a lot. We use a lot of these kinds of phrases when you're trying to have a bit of diversity in your linking phrases in writing. You need to understand that there are times when you are going to use a verb afterwards, but you need to change it to a noun because of these types of phrases. Okay, they can be, let's take this one away. We've got swimming is healthy. I like swimming. Okay, so here the gerund is a subject. Here, gerund is an object. And I think that understanding that they can be both subjects and objects is really important. And if we get the basics of nouns here, if we just write, the basics here. Nouns are things. Nouns are always subjects or objects. There's no choice. It's always that way. Nouns can be one word or multiple words. If you take away those three things, that's important. Okay. There's always some kind of relationship to a verb, always. They can be one word or they can be multiple words. That's a really useful thing to think about. And I think when it comes to things like how I'm going to structure my sentence or how I'm going to read in reading part C, it's good to be able to say this sentence has this action in it. This is the person doing it, or this is the person receiving it. This is what is being received. This is what is being done. And I think that if you think about your sentences that way, then English will become a lot easier. Instead of thinking word by word by word, think of these three words are a noun. These two words are a verb. these three words are a noun, and this is the subject and this is the object. I think that's an easier way to think of things. Okay, so we'll talk a little bit about